So my name is Nickolay and I launched Storyworks in September 2024. Who am I? Well, I'm a storyteller, I'm a writer. I didn't used to think of myself as a storyteller or a writer. It was only something I just happened to do as a parent or as a teacher or a children's advocate, children's worker. But now I come to see storytelling and story work. Incidentally, I prefer the phrase story work because it gets away from the whole notion of storytelling being entertainment. Because for me, it can be entertaining, but it's more than that. It's much, much more than that. So I see story and story work as a soft and beautiful skill that has become, like so much stuff, it's become commodified. It's something you do to make money. Well, I'd like to make money, but I mean, sorry, this is where I go off. You can take it this way. And it's excellent that people can make their work as a storyteller. However, I'm interested in more than that. I want that to be so for me, but I also want this soft and beautiful skill to become accessible, doable, and revalued. Okay, so storytelling is magic. And by magic, I mean that it makes things appear and disappear. What can it make appear? It can make courage appear, it can make resilience grow, it can make what I call remembering, as in recalling, so recalling the past, recalling old stories. But remembering for me is also a word with a hyphen in it. Remember, put back together again. We live in a culture that wants us to forget, to deny all sorts of stories and traditions and realities. And story can help with that. Story enables people to rediscover stuff. For example, the story of Red Riding Hood. I mean, I would just like to say that those 19th century story collectors mainly actually got other women to do it rather than themselves, but that's an aside bit of spite, really, again. But they eviscerated traditional stories. So the story that's Red Riding Hood is actually something that could be called the grandmother's tale, and it's a story of adolescent emerging sexuality, aging and menopause, sexual predators, and women's solidarity. And it's much, much more interesting. And of course, those 19th century writers, just like people now, want to remove that stuff from our memory and from our knowledge, because those stories are differently empowering and equipping. What story does, when I tell a story, it immediately sits between me and the people with whom I'm telling that story. And the words become their words, if they want to use them. And stories sit physically in the room. Stories can equip us to enable us to work individually and together to make the world a healthier, happier, more equal, more just place. Despite what the people who speak from the shadow might say. What does Storyworks do? And I come from multiple perspectives on this, but the three things that Storyworks offers are publishing, training, and telling. The publishing is done in such a way that everything that Storyworks publish, that either other people write, that's coming, or that I write, that's already here, it will be written in a way that you can tell it out loud. I'm interested in how people let the words come out of their mouths, so everything is written in a way to make that easier. There are several books that Storyworks is working on. The first one, Stories That Help Courage and Hope in a Difficult World. Concentrated on 4 themes: earth, love, resistance, and peace. All very different. And But what I wanted them to do, and what I hear they do, is lift people's hearts, make people cry, tell people stuff they've forgotten, encourage people day to day. And Storyworks in this context is unashamedly radical. So I will both advocate in these stories the presence and importance of love. But love not only in terms of being with someone that you love, but also how love acts on the world. So a refugee mother who was denied money for her antenatal treatment, antenatal care, for her birth care, had to find the money to pay for it. In the end, she got a status and it was paid for. But she now, wherever she walks with her newborn, she holds the newborn tight because she remembers being in a rocking boat, crossing the sea and seeing other people's babies drown. So that's an act of love, that she's loving her child and not despairing. There's an act of love in my great-grandparents who walked from Warsaw to Hamburg to escape pogrom, anti-Jewish attacks. And I tell a story from the point of view that there is a creature called pogrom who can infect anybody, just as it infects Gaza now, just as those who would talk about Holocaust create Holocaust. And if that offends you, take it on the chin, because, do you know what I mean? It's like, resistance stories are stories of people who stood up to power, valued action, held tight to what they knew was best, was good for people, didn't hate, although only when necessary. And the peace stories are what I would otherwise have called, I am talking about this a lot, would otherwise have called the white feather stories. The white feather in our culture was given to soldiers in the First World War who were seen as cowards. In fact, that's just a reversal. There are several cultures in which the white feather is a symbol of courage, confidence, integrity and spirit. And I tell those stories. So in stories that help, I'm aware there's a continuum of offer. So I will talk about active non-violence. I will talk about the courageousness of people who were conscientious objectors in the First World War, who were crucified in front of barbed wire and they couldn't move their faces away from it. But also, I'll talk about people who physically stand up to fascists. I will talk about the Kurdish revolution, in a sense, the deep Kurdish story of the blacksmith, or the blacksmith's wife and the blacksmith, who in the end killed the tyrannical king, justly. So I'm aware of all sorts of contradictions and stuff, and that's fine for me. The second book that's almost ready to go is called Oh But Listen, and it's a radical retelling of New Testament biblical stories, but from a perspective of social justice, lifting up the hidden voices of children, women and men, and rewriting the stories, just rewriting them, and not just simply retelling them for the sake of it, but telling them as if you're looking at a great myth that has a deeper meaning than simply, I believe in the virgin birth. Well, I don't, you know, who does? Well, some people do. Sorry, oops, guys. But, you know, all of that is really interesting stuff. And some of the stories, I may read one later, is radical retelling, restructuring of what the Romanized church, the established church, tried to wipe out of memory. And then the third book is working title is Really Grim Tales, which is a retelling of some of those 19th century, I've used the word already, eviscerated stories but also bringing in other stories of other traditional stories from different cultures. Well, I have to be really careful with this. They're not my stories. I would find them and offer them in the context of the cultures that they come from. That matters a lot. You know, one of the things that comes to mind, for example, with 19th century stories, leaving aside Red Riding Hood and all that, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Turns out the dwarves maybe were German miners who were working in a polluted mine that made them, over generations, shrunken. There's a great tale of the Little Match Girl, Poor Little Thing, by Hans Christian Andersen, I think. How dare he? The match women's strike in the 1890s was led by vibrant, energetic, dangerous, young English and Irish working class women who even the police avoided. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and they educated the dockers in how to strike. So, there's some of that. So there's that. Then there's a piece of work on what's called the Earth story, which is a story from the beginning of Earth to the present day and the dilemmas we're facing. And then there's a book on the seasons for children, because there aren't any really decent books, I don't think, that put what happens to a tree through the seasons for children. And then there's more. Pre-COVID, I was offering workshops on storytelling and social change that often turned into storytelling and personal narrative, which is fine. And I want to do some of that. There is plenty of storytelling training out there that goes from, this is how you do it. What I'm interested in doing is putting people into a setting for a day where their imagination is evoked, and there are processes that I would use to do that, and then offer them multiple resources on which to think about telling a story. And people often just come up with their own. I want to do a learning setting for parents and how they can tell difficult stories to children, how they can handle difficult news in a way that isn't just this bad thing's happening. Storytelling, the intention is that I find venues and I deliver story, working on storytelling tours, a white feather tour perhaps. I'd like to do it around Armed Forces Day, but it's just that pushing my luck really. I think I'm interested in doing this and seeking aid for the doing of it, because people talk about it being a difficult world to get published, and it is, which is why I decided to set up Storyworks, because Storyworks has a tone for me that I'm a story worker, and my background is, as my working class heritage is, I want to raise that up. It is work, and people say you must love what you do, and I go, yeah, I do sometimes, but actually it's just hard work sometimes, and it's a creative process. So I'm seeking aid for it because I want what I do to be able to reach as many people as possible, which means sometimes I won't work through mainstream, so I won't use Amazon. My appeal is, if you like some of what I've said, and there are zones that you may go, oh, that's a bit uncomfortable, or I go, good, give money for that bit that you find uncomfortable. Yeah, please assist if you can. And I'm mindful of the story of the widow's mite. The mite was a coin, I think. And the story was that there's two people donating to the temple. And there's a rich man who plonks down bags of gold, and there's a widow who puts down one coin. And the spiritual teacher, the rabbi, if you like, says, well, which is of most value? And he then says, well, it's the widow's mite that's most valuable because of what it costs her to give that. It costs the rich man nothing to do that. So that I bear that in mind when I'm asking people to aid me in this. Because I see what I do in the context of mutual aid. We're here to aid each other. And what I notice that when I'm selling books or giving books, it's what I can do to help. I just say this because as a person of working class heritage, I find it difficult to ask for this assistance. And at times I've found or thought that what I'm doing it alone, but in fact I'm not. I have people who read my work for me, I have people who encourage me, I have people who say, have you thought about doing this? I have people who act as proofreaders, I have a wonderful book cover designer, I have a typesetter, and I have a really good printer. So actually I have a team. We're just not all in one space. And there's a black cap singing in the garden. So whatever you're able to do to assist with this, thank you. There's an American singer who died a couple of years ago, whose name I never can remember, Martin can tell you. And he sings a song about we're building a ship. You might not sail in the ship, but we're all building the ship. And the ship of the world that takes us, or is the world that we want to make. And you just have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it and finding ways to aid that. And often, like with this piece of work, the work that we do for a better world needs imagination and wonder and resilience, and doesn't just need ideology and economics and politics. If we don't have it with imagination and wonder, we'll make the same mistakes, and I don't want to be part of that. As I say in the front of the book, Stories That Help, I'm unreservedly positive. Drive some of my friends nuts. But I am. We can do that. That'll do.